You know when you're so frustrated with your spouse, you're hitting heads, everything they do is bugging you, the negative things are super accentuated. You know what I'm talking about? Yeah, that's what we're gonna go over today. I have 4 steps for you. 4 steps for you that I did a couple of weeks ago when I was in the middle of it. 4 steps that I'm gonna give you that you can mimic that will completely help you. Especially the degree to which you do the steps will help you immensely, and that is something that I can promise you. After you watch the 4 steps, I'll jump back on and tell you the results of what happened with me and my husband. So let's jump back to when I was in the middle of it and one really raw morning, and we'll start with the first step. So step 1, write it all down. Get every single ounce of it out. So here's my list. Not kidding. Not kidding. This is what has been looping. And this is where Satan is tricky, right? Because he reminds you and he makes you loop it over and over and over and over so that you don't forget, right? So yesterday morning, I was like, okay, I'm gonna write all of this down. Every single ounce of it down, because I had to get it on paper so that I could stop looping it. Every single thing that bugs or that I'm tired of, or right, all of it has to be written down. And then something happens. I can stop looping it. I might still be in it, but I can stop looping it. And that's an important step. And then, depending on how frustrated you are, that depends on how long you just let the list sit. You might be able just to write it and do the whole exercise and then be done. But sometimes you feel extra frustrated or extra tired of it, or whatever's going on. And it says a lot about where your heart is right in that moment. And no judgment, because everybody's hearts go through roller coasters. So let the list sit and let it resonate truth for as long as you need it to. Obviously, there's a turning point when it becomes unhealthy and you need to kick your butt in gear to do the next steps, right? But sometimes you're just really frustrated and you have to sit and allow this truth to resonate, and maybe even to help you feel validated for a minute, because sometimes our hearts are there. Okay, so by this point, some of you might be thinking, wow, this really isn't fair to her husband that, she shows us a list. Some of you might be thinking that until you realize, wait a second, that happens to me too, right? And guess what? This happens to my husband. It happens to everybody, because we all, like I said, have hearts that go on roller coaster rides. And we all have things that we have to work through and that are hard, and sometimes it's not really easy to just go with that flow, or to accept, or to love and be kind through it sometimes. All right, step 2. Step 2 is you have to analyze the list and ask yourself the question, why is this my reality? And also the second and somewhat simultaneous question that you need to ask is, what is the reason that you feel like you need to hold on to this? Why do you feel like you need to hold on to that? Step 2 can be really tricky, because you really have to go inward. You really have to spend time pondering. I spend time praying and ask to be shown. Asking why this is your reality is hard. It's kind of an internal question. We have thought leaders that have said everything that we are experiencing is a projection of what is going on inside of us. So because our relationship is manifesting these types of things, look at what that is saying about you and what it is that you are hitting up against. Because normally This is a moment of truth, but normally I go to Jake, my husband, and I say, these are all my things. And like, I want him to validate me and say he's sorry or whatever, you know? And I'm going to try something different. I'm trying something different. I don't think that is the best way, because all of this stuff is true. All of this stuff is true. Everything that I'm tired of experiencing in our relationship is true. But just because it's true doesn't mean that I'm not manifesting it, right? That something about me is what's bringing that into fruition. A tip for step 2 when you're asking, why is this my reality, is to remember that sometimes the word maybe helps. So, like, one of mine is, maybe this list is a good example of what it feels like to be him. And I think sometimes maybe helps us when we're looking inside, for us to face the truth a little bit easier, and maybe being kinder to ourselves by saying, well, maybe I do this, or maybe this is what that looks like for me. And then we can arrive at the truth of that, if it is true. Then step 3 is to rewrite the story. It's not to sit down and hash it all out and to figure it out with my man. Maybe there's a time and a place for that, right? Maybe you need to have your words heard at times. But for me, rewriting the pattern looks like rewriting the story. Rewrite the story the way that you want it to be. And sometimes it helps to write the story like this. I want, fill in the blank. But then you have to take the I want out of it and write it as it is so. So all of the things that you say that you want, then you rewrite it and say, take the I want out of it. Write it as if it is so. And then step number 4. You have to burn this. You have to burn all of your original feelings, your frustrations, because as long as you're holding on to it, it's getting in the way of you moving forward. Okay, you can laugh with me about this one. This one is on my list of why do I need to hold on to this list, the list that I have since burned, okay? But I'm looking back over this, and it says that this list helps me feel like I'm not crazy. Isn't that so sad that our truths and the things that we tell ourselves, we think that is what is making us feel validated, right? And that where we aren't the crazy ones. And the very fact that we have the list and that we run the list, that's what makes us crazy. Okay, I realized something else. All of the I wants have to be burned too. They have to. Because they aren't powerful. They're not a powerful statement, and they're not something that I want to hold on to. Feels amazing to let it go. I'm just going to start living as if all of this is real. I'm just going to shock him out of his shoes and just start living as if all of this stuff is real. I'm going to go from things were super weird and neighborly, and I'm just going to go right into this whole thing. All of this is true. Okay, let's see what happens. After I did those steps, I felt great almost immediately. Burning the list was such a real physical representation of me letting that go and not hanging on to those things anymore. And I went about for the next 2 days, honestly, just feeling good. And I felt content. And yes, sometimes I did have to revisit the list, but I felt good. And Jake could tell. I didn't bring it to him. I didn't talk about anything. I just started living. And Jake didn't feel good. He wasn't on the same train as I was on. And that's okay. But he hadn't processed things the way that I had. And that's something that he needed to do, right? And so we were talking about it, and I mentioned, I'm not holding anything. And Jake said, well, I have a list of some things that we could talk about. I told you he had a list, right? I told you all of us have those lists and those things that we run. And so I said, great, let's talk about your list. And we sat down and he told me everything on his list. And I listened to him. And after I listened to him, I asked the question, are you done? Have you said everything that you needed to say? And he said, yeah, I think so. And I said, how did it feel? And he's like, yuck. And then we talked about how that was the past and how it doesn't feel good to live there. It feels yucky. And I talked to him about this 4 steps that I did to help me process and to let it all go and to let all the past go and to create something that was awesome and promising and that made us feel good. And so Jake did it. He did all of the steps. He went through it. He burned his list. He recreated a list. And then guess what? He read me the list. And the list was awesome. And it made us emotional. And we both shared our new realities. And that felt empowering. We were able to love each other right from that spot and to move forward. We both took more personal responsibility. We both decided to create our lives instead of allowing our lives to happen to us, right? And sometimes when we're in the middle of it and it's hard, we have to get our list back out and read over it. And sometimes we just have to paste it right to our forehead and walk through the day on those hard days. But you can do that. You can recreate your story. And it feels better to live in what you're creating on purpose than to live in the past and all of the proof that you have. As long as you stay there, you'll never leave there. So recreate and move into the future and live as though that story is your reality. And then it becomes your reality. So if your spouse isn't on board, still do it. Still write the story, still live in the story, and you'll be surprised at the ripple effect that you create. I will bet that they come on board and that they decide that that's a much better place to live than circling and looping the past. The whole idea is rewrite the story the way that you want it to be. And then live in it. Do all your part, and the rest of it will fall into place. I genuinely hope that these 4 steps help you. I hope that you find power in recreating your life, your story, and living in a space that excites you and makes you feel good, and letting go of everything else that gets in the way. I'm excited, I'm jazzed for you that you now have 4 steps to help you find more power than you thought you had. I'm wishing you all of the best and a reminder that you can do it. Keep going. I'll see you guys soon.